All right. Thank you everyone for joining today. So it's the eve of Suicide Prevention Day, and you might have already seen some of the great work that Samaritans of Singapore has been doing in the lead up to tomorrow. They have this campaign on how suicide sees no gender, and they're also doing a virtual walkathon, which you can sign up for on howareyou.sg. So suicide prevention, it's a very broad topic of which there are many angles to approach it. Today, I'm going to speak to Charlene Heng. She's the head of core services at SOS, and she'll be giving us a perspective of someone who is really working at the front lines of suicide prevention. Before we begin, there will be a couple of poll questions that will be coming up, as we wait for a few people to come in, or as others, some might be joining late. Just do know that we're going to be answering questions at the end of the session. So feel free during the session, drop in any questions in the Q&A box and we'll address those at the end. And if you're joining us from Facebook and want to ask a question, we're actually answering primarily the questions that are coming up on Zoom. So you can still join the actual Zoom call. You just have to sign up on our website at calmcollective.asia. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Charlene.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi, Alyssa.
All right. Yeah. So my first question for you is around COVID. So COVID period has been a really tough time. And this year in general has been a tough time for everyone. There's people, having job loss. There's people, having a tough time with their family. How has that translated into distress calls for SOS compared to previous years?
Right. Thank you for the question. Indeed, we see an increase in our calls. Every month, we actually receive about 500 to 1,000 more calls compared to the same time last year. So since January to August, every month we picked up more than 3,000 calls. And the same time last year, it would have been about 2,000 plus. Calls with suicide ideation also increased. Every month we have easily about 100 to 200 more calls that indicate or verbalize very clear suicide ideation.
Yep. Right. Are there any trends that you see in general in terms of, what kind of calls you receive? Are you receiving, men versus women? What kind of issues or stressors are most common?
Right. Okay. Maybe we can get audience to, before I review, just guess. Okay, make a guess. Out of those who call our hotline, do you think more females call us, or do you think more males call us?
Yeah, you could just type it on in the chat.
Yeah,
okay, there's a lot of people saying males. Probably males are calling hotline.
I'm gonna give like just 2 more seconds before I reveal the answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so over the hotline, every year it is always more females, just slightly more than 50% females, and males will be about 40-odd%. And in July this year, 1st of July, we actually roll out our very first SOS Care Text. It's an online chat service meant to be positioned as a crisis chat where people can reach us in the wee hours of the night through the Facebook Messenger. And over there, about 60% of the clients who text us are female.
Why do you think that is?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is?
Actually, okay, to be honest, we are actually very glad to see close to 50% males. We actually expect less than that. Yeah. And to have actually close to 50% males confiding, reaching out, it is very encouraging. And in conjunction with World Suicide Prevention Month this year, our SOS campaign actually focused on debunking this age-old stereotype, men don't cry. Since the beginning of this year, we actually saw a slight increase, 2% of males slight increase by 2% of males calling us, making it very, very, very close to 50%. And a lot of these males, when they call us, they told us that they have not spoken to anyone else. We are like a stranger that they ever confess that they are thinking about suicide and actively, very seriously thinking about attempting. Yeah. So we look forward to the society gradually breaking free from this stereotype to create a safer space where more male don't just call a hotline or text us, but be able to share with others around them, these thoughts that they are actually dealing with on a daily basis.
All right. So how does one actually become a hotline volunteer? And how are volunteers, if I call, how are they trained to de-escalate a crisis?
Mm. Okay, so our hotline volunteers, basically anyone can apply to be a hotline volunteer, and they can apply through our SOS website. And we are very thankful because I think we see many people out there having a passion in this area. Every year we easily receive 500 to 600 applications. Yes, and however, there's this old saying that in today's generation and era, especially, talent is cheap, but dedication is costly. And to have volunteers who are dedicated for this cause, meaning it's easy to have volunteers on board, it's not easy for them to stay. However, we are proud to say that about 40% of our volunteers stay with us for more than 5 years. I guess the moment they join us and go on this volunteering work, this meaning and passion grows with time. So how are they trained? And they are trained with us for many months. We go through very rigorous training system and a screening process. So after training, they will be assessed to be suitable for phone room supervision. And this can easily take 6 to 9 months before they are ready to be on their own on the hotline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aside from crisis hotline, what other intervention or postvention programs does SOS run?
Yeah. Okay. So what other programs? So let's say you're a client and you're a person who is thinking of suicide, and you probably call a hotline or text us or email us, and you will find our volunteers trying their best to check in with you whether you would like any follow-up service. So some of the follow-up service that we provide include our outcall, meaning our team of professional outcall counselors will call out to you for crisis support. And we also provide face-to-face counseling for those who are going through suicide crisis.
Right.
And we also provide specialized bereavement counseling and a monthly support group called Healing Bridge for those who next of kin who actually go through loss of a loved one through suicide.
Yeah, I've actually been a beneficiary of that. So it's a great group. Actually, I didn't find out until maybe 2 years into my loss that there was this thing for suicide loss survivors, but it is out there, and it's a very good community.
Yeah,
So,
I actually want to, riding on
Oh.
what you say, Alyssa, that this year in November, we will be holding ISOS Lost Day, International Survivor of Suicide Day. It's on the 21st of November, Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., where our next of kin or anyone who lost a significant others, it could be a family member, he or she could be a family member, colleague, friend, anyone who go through the loss, they can come together as a community to support each other. This year, what is a little different is we collaborate with different social service agency as well as NUS to have a mini conference kind of modality, so people can come together to learn at the same time, share with each other their experience.
Okay. So we were talking about community, and I think a lot of people in the community, especially those who are attending now, there's an interest in what can we actually do on an individual level, especially to prevent suicide, and what should one do if someone says, tells you they feel suicidal, and also what should you not say, because there's always that fear. Are they gonna make it worse? How do you react to this?
Okay, Alyssa, please bear with me because this part I'm going to be going into certain details. Okay, in the first place, it is not easy for someone to confide in another about suicide ideation. Research study in the US actually found out that this whole topic of suicide, the tendency for someone to disclose their suicide ideation is actually less than a person who will disclose about their mental health struggle or even HIV. And this what is hindering them? It could be an anticipated stigma. That means the anticipation of how the other person will react or respond, or it could be an internalized stigma, what they believe to be true about suicide, which is morally weak, not right, a sin. And with that, because of that, the research study actually shows that suicide attempters, they actually reviewed, before their attempt, they actually reviewed to less than 25% of their regular contacts about their ideation, which means if you have 4 close friends, regular contacts means person that you get in contact regularly. So if you have 4 very regular contacts, such as your friend, family members, out of that 4, you only tell 1 or less, or no one. Yeah. So if it happen to be that someone confide in, is actually quite that means the person trusts you. And this research, actually, our SOS Deep Stick survey that we conducted end of May to June this year actually echoes that 72% of our respondents, 2,000 over respondents, actually mentioned that embarrassment will be one big major barrier of help seeking. Yeah. And now, if anyone shares their suicide ideation with you, what they experience next from this confession will be very critical, because it will determine whether they will share again. So what do we say or what do we not say? Now, first things first, avoid any form of power struggle with the person. What do I mean by that? Do not insist or do not say to the person, stop thinking about suicide. It is like, don't think about the white elephant. And the fun thing is this, the interesting thing is, the freedom and the liberty to think of suicide as an option is ironically relieving for them. That liberty, that freedom, that option, and that relief actually may de-escalate that desire or that urge, because it brings some relief to that intense distress at that moment. However, we don't stop there. How can you ask me to tell my friend not to think, okay, you go ahead and think, I will not stop you? No, we don't stop there, okay? We don't stop there. We acknowledge that the suicide thoughts are real, but right now, what we need to do is this. We have to differentiate between ideation and action. So we acknowledge that ideation, we don't ask them to stop thinking because it's impossible. But it is the action part that we want to intervene as a person, as a community, as a person that a friend confide in. While the suicide thoughts are tormenting and real, what the distressed person choose to do next is the critical thing. They can choose to self-harm out of that distress from the suicidal ideation, but they can also choose to talk to someone instead. They can also choose to call the hotline. They can also choose to do grounding exercises that were taught to them by therapists. So as a person whom you are confided to or in, after a lot of empathizing with a person's wish to die. Now, you empathize with their wish to die doesn't mean you endorse the plan. You are never part of the death plan. That one you have to be very clear. But you want to be part of the rescue plan. You want to be part of the plan to leave. So how do you say to the person? What do you say? Acknowledge the pain. Tell the person, so and so, you are in immense pain. You wish to die to end the pain. It's very painful, but you confided in me. So I want to speak to this part of you that wish to live, no matter how small this part is. And I am here with you. You are very distressed now. Besides harming yourself, what else can we do together differently? And I can tell you, it takes practice. Because when suicide has become a habit, habit takes time to break and unlearn. So one of the interesting thing about from the research from US about suicide attempters, those who survive from suicide attempts, is that they actually describe three things that are helpful, that they find helpful from people they confide in. Maybe, I think I've been talking so much. How about just getting our participants to type in what do they think are the three things that they find helpful from people, that they confide in, that will make them disclose again, or confide again when the next time the ideation is strong, the urge is strong.
I see someone said support from loved ones. Anybody else? I mean, my guess would be, showing that you can listen without judgment, maybe. And also just not necessarily reacting. In my experience, I think the first time I had a loved one share that they were suicidal, I panicked. I was like, no, you can't do that. Okay.
Okay.
Definitely see more. Have listening ears. Make sure they don't feel alone.
Thank you, participants. Wow.
Acknowledge their pain is real.
I think this group of participants are those who don't need this.
They're already
who don't need this webinar. But thank you for being here. But you know what you can do? Go and spread the word. Okay, you have it in you. Go out and spread the word. Okay, to 10 more people who needs to hear this but are not here today. Okay, what are the three things? The first thing is to ask more questions instead of telling them what to do. Ask more questions and display curiosity, seek to understand. So that's the very first thing that suicide attempters, after their attempts, they find this helpful. That if their community or their loved one would find out more from them instead of saying, why did you do that? Yeah. Do you know how much you have hurt me by doing that? Yeah. Okay, the next thing is about being willing to hear honest answers, even though it can be emotionally distressing for the loved one. So we have incidences where, a lot of our young writers who write to us, they come from privileged families. They are not going through, they are not marginalized, they are not from disadvantaged backgrounds, but they are suicidal. And parents come in, when we speak to the parents, our heart also goes out to the parents, because we can tell that parents really love their kids. They really love their kids. And they give their best, everything they can to them. And the honest answer they heard from their kid is, that's not what I want. Ouch. Yeah. So then, as the next of kin, or as the person who hears, are we ready or willing to hear the most crude and honest answers from someone in distress and thinking of suicide? And it can be very exhausting, because as a caregiver, you probably have poured and give your everything. You probably have nothing left. And yet the other person probably still find some gaps. Yeah. So then how to come together to address those gaps? The third thing is projecting emotional stability. So one of the in the research study, actually, it is echoed constantly that suicide attempters actually find that they choose who to select. How they choose who to tell. They choose those who are emotionally stable, or whom they perceive as emotionally stable. So not only, you need to support the other person, manage the other person's distress, you must also manage your own distress. Yeah. And this is echoed by our own SOS 50 years of experience. We have callers who call us pretty often, but every time they call us, their risk is medium to high, and of course they are attended to by different volunteers. And interestingly, our callers told us that those that they found helpful, those, whether it's called volunteers or people around them, the ones that are helpful are those that are calm and do not react or panic when they first shared about the ideation. That was most helpful to them.
Right. So at what point, if I was a caregiver, at what point should I actually call the hotline and I can't handle this myself, even if I follow, step 1, 2, 3 that you've given.
Caregiver?
Yeah, at what point should I know you receive calls not just from people who have the suicidal ideation themselves, but sometimes from concerned loved ones who are afraid that their loved ones might hurt themselves. At what point should that caregiver call the hotline? I asked this from my own personal experience where I was once a caregiver, and actually I was afraid to call the hotline because I was afraid I might escalate the situation. And then also what happens afterwards, I wasn't really quite sure. Is the police going to get involved? Would he be sent to IMH? And would that really, he already trusts me. If I do that, will he not trust me in the future?
Okay, SOS work very closely with the police, and we share very close and very good working relationship. And we can share with you the heartbeat and passion of the police force is a lot of times to ensure safety of the person. So first things first, safety. So with the decriminalization of suicide in January 2020, attempt suicide is no longer a crime. So SPF will no longer record it as an offense. So with that, the whole process of decriminalization recognizes treatment rather than prosecution. So what happens after a police is activated? There are usually three course of action or what follows after. The first is if there and then there are next of kin or people whom the distressed person can be handed over to, the case probably close off from there. So the presence of a stable next of kin who are deemed able to help the person there and then is very critical assessment whether the case will be closed at that point. However, if at that point the distressed person is deemed as needing medical attention, example, if they have harmed themselves, they have swallowed bleach, they have done anything that is harmful to the body and immediate medical attention is required, then most likely they will be helped, they will be sent to the hospital, general hospital for treatment. A third possibility is conveying to the institution of mental health, for the psychiatric assessment. And they may or may not be warded depending on their situation as assessed by the psychiatrist or medical officer. Yeah. So to answer your question, sorry, Alyssa, can I go on a little bit more?
Go on.
Okay, now, as a caregiver, many people, many webinars, many seminars talk about warning signs, and you can easily Google for warning signs. And warning signs come in a few forms, verbal, or, giving away possessions, or emotional distress or withdrawal from people around them. However, I can tell you, especially for next of kin and caregivers, they will tell you that these warning signs are no longer red flags. They are no longer warning signs because it happens every day. So then for caregivers, what do we do to differentiate between, to make a decision whether to activate ambulance or police for the distressed person? The first thing is to remember to treat or differentiate between chronic suicidality and acute suicidality. Now, what's the difference? For a person in acute suicide crisis, the activation of police and ambulance is for the purpose of ensuring survival. What do we mean by acute? Acute means suicide is as a result, attempt suicide is as a result, okay, of underlying circumstantial or relational situation that happens together and causing immense distress at that point of time. So then possibly the activation of police and ambulance will be needful to ensure the person is saved, that to prevent a suicide at that moment. Now, what is the eventual goal for suicide that are acute is to return the person to their baseline, okay, or normalcy, all right? And that will be a longer term or the next counseling goal or psychiatric treatment and all that. Now, we mentioned about acute suicidality the next thing is to differentiate from acute to chronic. Chronic is the difficult one. Chronic is the one where suicidality is the baseline. Okay, and suicide has been such a well-established option at the back of the person's mind that it could have been already a habit, a habitual thought that they can always return to when they encounter life's difficulties. And even though some of these things can be so trivial to layman, regular person, to a distressed person with a chronic suicidality, it is an option in every day. Yeah. And for such situation, the goal is to help the person develop reasons for living. Now, if a person feels punished for living and there's no meaning for living, then death is the next option. So, yeah, the purpose of a caregiver then, the role then is to actually facilitate that purpose for living, as well as to always return them to that. Hey, you learned this coping from your therapist. You learned this option, an alternative. Besides self-harming, you learn an alternative. Can we practice that? And don't take it for granted that it's going to happen after one time. You probably need to practice and practice. So for those in suicide, in chronic suicidality, you can't possibly activate the police and ambulance every single day. So and research has also informed us that when the distressed person with chronic suicidality is conveyed to the hospital too often or mental health institute too often, it actually has a detrimental effect in the long run because it will cause them to re-experience a trauma again and again. Yeah.
So you mentioned something about signs. So I guess what I'm hearing from you is really, yes, there's a list of signs you can Google, but for some people there's not necessarily signs at all, or they're showing signs all the time, and these are all normal, but we just have to figure out, which one it is so that you can react accordingly.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, speaking from a caregiver's point of view, I understand it can be really difficult, and caregivers can be at a loss. How do you help a loved one, especially when they have debilitating depression and debilitating suicidal thoughts all the time? What advice would you have for caregivers, or resources that caregivers can turn to so that they can also cope better?
Okay. I think we have mentioned to many caregivers, and this is real. Maybe before I share, Alyssa, maybe now I interview you. As a caregiver, what are your thoughts? What is helpful for you?
What I would have wanted was, someone who could listen to me, and someone I could vent my problems to, because you end up being that pillar of support, and you have to, as you said, you have to be that stable person where you're keeping your emotions in check, even though there's something really scary happening in front of you. So what I wish I had known is that, as a therapist, as a caregiver, you can go to therapy too, or you should go to therapy too. You should have someone you can vent to and really just kind of share the load, because it can be very difficult to think that you have to do it all on your own.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. And in Singapore, there are actually resources, community resources that caregivers can turn to, and one of those helpful ones will be caregiver support group. So from agencies, social service agencies such as Club Heal, such as Caregiver Alliance, they do hold regular support groups, as well as training programs for caregivers by caregivers. So a veteran caregiver or caregiver who had some years of experience and gathered practice wisdom can share and really relate with a new caregiver going through a new chapter or journey, caregiving journey. Right.
Okay. Yeah. For those who are caregivers who are watching this talk, there is going to be a talk on 12th September. It's called Difference in Youth Mental Wellness Dialogue for Caregivers. It's organized by Care Corner Northeast, and in association with SAMH. Sorry, it's a 12 September, 10 to 11:30 a.m. We'll link it in the chat. In the meanwhile, so I've seen a lot of questions coming in that maybe we can address some of these. So in the meanwhile, I think Sabrina, you had a poll question as well for those attending. What kind of talks would you like to hear in the future? So, so here's one question for you, Charlene. You mentioned that it helps to ask questions to people who tell you that they feel suicidal. What sort of questions can we ask to de-escalate the situation? If you can elaborate on that.
Okay, yeah. So let's say a person confide in you. So maybe to provide some structure, for caregivers, you can follow this structure. First, ask open-ended questions that help you develop the conversation. So what do we mean by open-ended questions? The basic 4W1H is helpful. It helps you understand more the context in which suicide ideation is developed. Yeah. So don't rush into asking them or giving them solutions or tips on what to do. Yeah. Okay. Second part is about asking them, okay, how long have you had this ideation? Did it develop? Did it develop just a while ago, or it has been years? There is a difference, right? If it developed last week and developed for years, because then in between the coping will be very different. If it has been around for 1-2 years, then I'm very curious to know what have you tried in that 1-2 years. Yeah, you may be in immense pain. The truth is you are alive. So in these 1-2 years, I will only imagine how much you had gone through alone, how much strength and resilience you have in you to survive this 1-2 years. So tell me, what have you done? And are they helpful? Yeah. The fact that you told me now, or you tell me now, probably suggests that some of these things that you tried are no longer working.
Okay.
Then
there's this question, which is, okay, so you're aware that a friend has suicidal thoughts. How regularly should you be checking in with them without, turning it into a trigger?
Okay, this is
just asking them, is that a trigger?
Okay, so the US, some research from the US actually revealed that after a suicide attempt, right, a lot of things happen to the suicide attempters after their suicide attempt, and that is their next of kin and loved ones start to activate like a civilian kind of track their movement more closely, check their messages, call them more regularly. Though out of good intent, it actually backfired. Yeah, it actually caused stress. Yeah. So how about this? Instead of us checking in on the person, empower them and give them that responsibility instead. Yeah. So instead of me checking on you, can you tell me, how you are doing? That means you text me how you are doing. You tell me how you are doing, and we set a very concrete goal. In a week, I would like to hear from you once or twice.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I don't hear from you, then I will check in.
Okay. This is an interesting question. Any tips for cultivating reasons to live within the suicidal person? So you mentioned, especially for those who have chronic suicidality, it's something you need to craft this, help them shape their mind to why should they be here? Why should they continue to live?
Okay. For a person who no longer have desire to live, first things first, it is very punishing to be alive. Every single day that they are alive feels like a punishment. And that's no wonder why, not that they want to die, but really probably at that point in time, dying is an option to end all this. developing the reason to live is never easy. We can tell you from our years of experience, clinical experience, sessions with clients, this is the most difficult question to answer because we always get don't know. Yeah. So take baby steps. Don't be discouraged. Yeah. Take baby steps. Now, there are a few reasons why people would continue to live. Some is responsibilities on earth that is not done, not over. Some is maybe some passion, a part of them, that a passion that was not fulfilled, a desire, no matter how small. Some is if don't have passion, don't have pre-existing passion or responsibility, then they may need to cultivate interest, cultivate a new area of hobby, and that has to be explored together. Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Okay. I'm seeing a few questions about, what if someone is suicidal, but they don't have the courage to do it, but they still have a thought? What are the chances that they will attempt? And maybe let me reword that as, how do you tell if someone's just kind of having the thought, but isn't quite, at the point where they will actually attempt the idea?
Okay. Managing the hotline, I mean, we have existed for 51 years over the hotline, and we have countless of people who tell us, I'm at the ledge, I really want to die, I don't have the courage to jump. And that is the lack of courage to jump is the only thing that's stopping me from, it's the only thing only reason why I'm still alive today. So, okay, and there are also people who say, nope, I want to die. Nope, I don't have reasons to live. Yeah. But I think just now I spoke about this part. I want to speak to this part of you that wants to live. So challenge. No, you confide in me. There is a part of you, no matter how small, okay, that is still looking for that hope.
Right.
And I want to speak to that part.
So when someone tells you something, always take it seriously, because you really don't know what's happening necessarily in their mind, or they might not be revealing everything to you, but always take it seriously. Right. Okay. Someone has asked, what's the best way to move forward if someone opens up to you about a past suicide attempt? What should you say to that? And how do you, again, kind of not respond in a way that is sensitive, that is not gonna get them to close up again?
Okay. Yeah. First things first, if the suicide has happened before, it increases. If the attempt has ever happened before, it increases the chance of it happening again, because it is something that the distressed person has tried, been there, done that, experienced, and it is an option that he or she can return to. First things first, check how long was the last attempt. There is a difference between the last attempt was last week and the last attempt was last year. If it was last year, then what is happening in the last 1 year? What did you do differently? And those are strengths that we can elicit and affirm the person for.
Right. What if it's really recent?
What if it's really recent? Then first things first, thank the person for sharing and find out what made the person share.
Right.
By sharing with me, what are you looking for? Yeah, and affirm that courage to share.
Okay. There's this question that someone has asked about, what if, they've told you they're suicidal, but they don't want to share their suicide plan? Would you advise people to try to find out what their plan is so that you could stop them? Or is that, would that get them to kind of back off and stop telling you things?
Okay. There's something I would like to share with the community right here on Zoom. It's something not easy to swallow, but let's try this. Okay. I think as a good friend who will confide, whom was someone confide in you, or the next of kin, or caregiver, or a teacher, we always hear the distressed person say, "I'm going to tell you, but don't tell anyone else." I mean, that happens to our hotline volunteers. "I'm going to tell you, don't tell anyone else. I just want you to know." And then dot 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 dot. And then at the other side, you are like, "Huh? Then I know already. Then what do I do?" Right?
Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
there.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think as a person, confident, you need to first things first. Um, you need to define your role, or be clear of your role. Your role is never part of the death plan, and you have to firmly tell the other person that my role, I want to journey with you to live. But that doesn't mean I do not empathize with your suicide wish or your wish to die. I empathize, and I want to journey with you. Now, another thing that a person can do is to, you should try to increase the number of confidence, that the distressed person have, so that it doesn't fall on yourself only. Yeah. So with time, introduce others that the distressed person can also call on. So the development of people who can support, the development of the network is important. Yeah, and you have to start really soon. The next is to, what we find helpful often is to then educate gatekeepers, educate the community on what to say, what not to say. So with that SOS, we do provide gatekeepers training for community and helpers out there who just want to be a helper to someone in need. Yeah.
How do you attend that gatekeeper training?
We have
Those
open
workshops?
runs. Yeah, workshop. It's just a one-day workshop.
Okay.
Yep, and you can sign up with SOS, register from our website, or call in to find out more.
Okay, that's really interesting to know. Had no idea.
Mm.
This is a common question that we get a lot. So this person is asking, they have a friend with suicidal thoughts, but they're not able to pay for the treatment. Who can they reach out to, or what kind of resources can they reach you to actually get help?
Okay. I need to find out how old is the person. If the person is below age 30, for they are able to get access free psychiatric assessment from chat. Yeah, chat,
Okay.
CHAT, chat under IMH. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Let's say they want to seek counseling service, they can also go to they can register with Limitless. Yeah, and there's a fund under the under there's a fund under Please Stay movement. There's a fund that's
Okay.
set up, yeah, by Miss Eileen Lake and probably her husband to help young person.
Okay.
Mm.
What if you're above 30?
Sorry.
What if you are above 30? You see, because you said that those really focus more on youth, right?
Okay. If those who are above 30 in Singapore, if you are looking for counseling or therapy, there are places that actually have very subsidized rate. When we say subsidized, it can go as low as $20 over to $40 over a session. Yeah, subsidized. And these places are namely Counseling and Care Center, Bryan Center. So these are places you probably can Google and maybe call up, understand the rates. And
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the other side of that, how do you convince a person to actually go for treatment if they're not willing to?
Okay, how about that? Maybe if they are not willing to go for face-to-face treatment, a lot of times, understand the reason. It is the barrier is also because of the unknown and the uncertainties. We have plenty of that. Our clients who go into us, they are so fearful because they don't know what to expect. But it could also be past negative experiences where they don't feel understood by professionals. So maybe first things first, maybe get them to go through, get in touch with resources that are less invasive, less threatening. Yeah, so examples would be maybe they can chat with us first, SOS, or they can write in through our email befriending service pet@sos.org.sg, and a team of trained professionals will help to talk to the person in distress to get past this initial
Right.
distress.
Right. There's also, you mentioned text messaging service, right? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. We're almost at the end. I think we're overrunning just a bit because we have quite a few questions. Someone has asked, what if a friend finds talking to helplines or receiving counseling useless? How do you deal with that?
Okay, there is a difference. There's a need to differentiate between the role of various services. What are these roles? There are crisis helplines, there are counseling service, and there are psychiatric treatments. So the role of a crisis hotline a lot of times is to provide at that critical moment empathetic presence and de-escalation of the crisis, so that a suicide won't happen then. So the purpose of a crisis hotline is never to resolve long-standing intra-psychic struggles, issues, or relational problems that require probably face-to-face interventions or in-depth psychotherapy. So there is a need for a person to understand that, before they decide which is that different route they will take.
Right. And sometimes it's a trial and error thing, right? So you might go to a therapist, they might not click with you on a personality basis, but if you keep trying, there could be, a better fit with a different person. So I think that's something also important to tell a friend if they are facing that kind of thing. I've received an interesting question and a little controversial. They asked, is it fair or is it possible that people who say they're suicidal are, just attention seeking, or the person has written may have attention seeking agendas?
Okay. This, we get that a lot. And the perceived threat, as attention seeking really drains the caregiver. It really drains the caregiver, and it drains the person who loves the distressed person, but feels being manipulated, or being used. Now, put it this way, SOS has been 50 years, and we have callers who call us every day, and after 1.5 years, we don't receive calls from the person anymore. The person died by suicide. And I can tell you, in the 1.5 years, and this is not just one case, 50 years of our experience, we've seen many. And in that one case, I can tell you, in the 1.5 years, we will have doubts or thoughts or wonder if this person real or not. So my advice is, we do our part. We do our part, to care for the person. However, as a gatekeeper, you do need to gain helpful skills, because relationship and communication is never one way. So I'm going to say something not easy to swallow. So as a person, am I doing anything that's perpetuating that cycle as well? So think about it. You want more answer, come for our gatekeeper training.
That's a really interesting question. Put the question to yourself. Are you perpetuating anything? That's a really good advice. There's so many questions here. Thank you everyone just for being really engaged here. Let me just find one last one. Okay. Let me see. Okay, wait, there was one more question that I was looking at that could be. All right. Sorry, just a lot of new ones came in, so I'm trying to find it. Okay, if a person doesn't have the cognitive ability and mental ability to approach professional help, how do you encourage that person to seek help? Should you find a psychiatrist for that person and just, okay, I take you here, go. Is that a good approach? Or
Sorry, need to come again. I think I missed
okay,
that. Yeah.
someone has asked, if someone's really depressed, they might not have the cognitive or ability to actually go and find a psychiatrist and go by themselves. As a caregiver, would the approach be, should you just take that person, do all the research for them, take them to the appointment with the psychiatrist, or is it, the person really has to do it themselves and be the one who's willing to attend and in order to benefit from treatment?
Okay. Now, in our code of ethics and practice, while we emphasize on self-determination, there are times self-determinations do not apply when the distressed person is deemed as incapacitated at that point to make decisions for themselves, or cognitively or emotionally in a state, or mentally in a state where there is little bandwidth or capacity to make a decision that is at that point sound. This is the time where caregivers may need to intervene.
Okay. All right. There are a lot of questions here. I think what we'll be doing is, saving these questions, and if there's anything, we'll be making some posts that can, answer to these questions. So we have just one last poll question to those of you who are joining. We'd like to hear somewhere, from you. What would you like to hear? We notice here, we get some questions repeating a few times, and that also gives us an indication. But yeah, we've overrun our time a little bit. Charlene, I really want to thank you for joining us today and giving us some really great insights. I think there's so many things that people can take away from this talk, how to talk to those who have suicidal ideation or who have shared, suicidal intent, and also what little ways that we can help really to best encounter those situations. So we are Calm Collective Asia. So we will be doing talks. We do it every month. So you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Just look up Calm Collective Asia and you can find us there. A replay of this talk will be available as well on our website, and it's on the same page that you found this talk on, and it'll also be on our Facebook page where we are live streaming. So thank you everybody for participating today. Thank you for all your questions. Really, there's a lot of questions, and I hope we answered most of them. And if you're out there and you really need support, please do reach out to SOS. SOS, as we mentioned, has a lot of programs, not just the crisis hotline, but support for caregivers, support for those who want to be able to gatekeep. So more of the things that Charlene has given, if you want those tips on, how do you talk, what questions do you ask, what questions not to ask, that proper training can be given by SOS. So please do follow them as well. They do have events and workshops throughout the year. And if you'd like to volunteer as well, SOS is there. They offer training and support if you'd like to be a hotline volunteer as well.
Yes, yeah, join us as a hotline volunteer. Yeah, sign a contract with us 10 years. Yeah. Just kidding.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good evening.